I think we can start. So welcome everyone to this, I don't remember which number, to the fifth or fourth? Fifth seminar. So before I introduce today's speakers, I just wanted to say the first three, the videos of the first three talks are now online in our YouTube channel. So if you missed them and you're eager to watch them, as you should, then you'll find them in the YouTube channel. And today I'm really glad to introduce two colleagues from King's College London. With one of them we share the same room, and it was nice. So Gabriel, Bodard and Faith Lawrence will be talking about the Snapdragon project, and specifically standards for networking ancient prosopographies. The project is about to end its first phase of funding, and they were, they said, investigated together in the project. So I will just leave it to you.
Thank you, Matteo. Thank you, and good afternoon. I'll start with a very brief customary apology for not speaking in German. If you heard me speaking in German, you would thank me for not speaking in German. So I'm just going to speak for the first few minutes of this presentation to introduce the Snapdragon project, the history of the project, and the goals and philosophy of the project, as it were. And Faith is going to speak for the bulk of the presentation, I think, on some more technical issues, including methodological issues and what the future of the project is likely to look like. I put this slide up here not in the expectation that you'll be able to read anything on it except for the titles, but this is a fairly clear overview of what the Snapdragon project involves. So it's a RDF triple store with information about multiple prosopographical resources, including the core prosopographical resources, and a whole bunch of others that might be included in there. This was a poster that we had up at a conference, so that's why it's so small. So a quick overview of what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to talk about the project history, about how we brought together the people who are involved in working on this project, and of course bringing people together is a double meaning. That's what the project is doing, and that's also what we had to do in order to start the project. I'm going to talk about where, in one way, the project comes from in terms of a project called Pelagios, which I'm sure you've heard about several times in this seminar series, which was one of the inspirations for and a very close collaborator with this project. And then Faith will then take over and she'll talk in more detail about our data model, how we go about creating identifiers for the persons in the Snap triple store, as I said, technical and methodological issues, the online form of the Snap data as it is now, and future developments of the Snap project that will follow. So the history of the project in many ways started when Faith was working on this other project called SOARS, Sharing Ancient Wisdoms, which was a manuscript and literature project, and they were, among other things, were thinking how useful it would be if there were a universal prosopography of classical and medieval persons that we could link to for every person who's referenced in these texts, for every person who's an author in these texts, and for every person who is cited without being named in these texts. And there is, of course, no single prosopography of everything in the ancient world. So we started thinking about what would it take to create the single prosopography of everything. The first thing we did is we went to the Digital Classicist mailing list, and we asked what prosopographies are there out there that are in digital form already, and we started editing this page on the Digital Classicist wiki of all of the prosopographies we know of that have digital form. This obviously is just the first half of the page, it carries on further, and we came up with a fairly good list. Even the list of all the online prosopographies we could think of, and we, not just being a small number of us, but the hundreds of people on the list who made suggestions, is still not in any way a comprehensive prosopography of the ancient world. It's not by any means all the prosopographies that were ever written. Most prosopographies are in print only. and it's not comprehensive. Even all those prosopographies would not be comprehensive of all the names that we could possibly extract from the ancient world. So we started thinking about ways in which to expand that. The other direction in which we started thinking was in terms of linked data. In 2012 and 2013, there were 2 workshops under the aegis of the Linked Ancient World Data Institute in New York and New Jersey, respectively. And these were bringing together various people with interest in the ancient world, not only the Greco-Roman world, but other ancient cultures, and looking at ways in which linked open data could be used to bring together different kinds of information about these projects. So not only person data, place data, object data, archaeological data, bibliographical data, all sorts of other kinds of data that can be brought together by virtue of the fact that this data is all online, effectively, and bringing this together. And so one of the things we did in the 2013 meeting was we had a breakout group on prosopographies where we got people together and we thought about how we might, and we already had an idea for this project called SNAP at the time, and how we might bring these people and these projects and these ideas together to start building the framework that might eventually turn into this universal prosopography. We never thought that in 1 year we would have a prosopography of the ancient world, of the entire ancient world. We actually never thought that in the first year we would actually create a single new prosopographical record that didn't already exist. We're at this point, we're still at the point of completely bringing together things that already exist, and that's by no means complete. So we ended up then with this relatively small network of people. So Faith and myself at King's College London, and colleagues at Duke University, KU Leuven, Oxford and Southampton, who brought together various expertise and various project interests into this small collaboration, and we started working on the funding bit, which led to the current project. So just to before we move on to the project itself, just to go back a little bit to one of the things that led to this project being possible, and to the way we decided to carry out this project. The ancient geography was a few years ahead of us in attempting to use linked data to bring together information and to turn that information into an authority file that could be linked to by projects who have lots of place references, either place references in texts or places in database fields, as they are the find location of archaeological objects, they are the current location of inscriptions, or they have the place of origin of texts, etc. And so with geography, in some ways, life is slightly easier. Our colleagues in Pelagios would obviously point out that it's not actually easier. There's all sorts of complexity in there as well. But in some ways it's easier in that we have a fairly good gazetteer of the ancient world. We have a very, very good gazetteer of the ancient world. We have the Barrington Atlas of the Greek and Roman world, which is itself a very, very good atlas to be starting from. And we have the Pleiades project here that is the digital instantiation of the Barrington Atlas, and is building on and is already several times larger than the Atlas in terms of the number of entities within it, and is building on that. So we have what is a fairly good model for a single authority file for ancient geography, in exactly the way that we don't have for prosopography. We have, on top of the Pleiades project, we have the Pelagios project, which has developed and has been for the last 2 or 3 years been developing standards for linking to the gazetteer from your texts, from your archaeological records, from your bibliographical records, from your epigraphic database, from your coin archive, to say this is the place that is meant by this. And they do this by means of open annotations, and the idea being that you attach to the annotation. The annotation is an annotation on your text with the name of the place on the annotation, or the identifier of the place, rather, that the text contains the name of the place, but the unique identifier, so you know which of the 32 Alexandrias in the ancient world is being referred. There are also, of course, many other gazetteers. Most prominent among them would be the geonames.org gazetteer, which has many millions of place names and locations and unique identifiers across the modern and, to some degree, historical world encoded within it. So the way Pelagios were modelling this was very close to the way we wanted to model being able to annotate text references with unique person identifiers. And so we always thought we would work very closely with Pelagios and Pleiades to do exactly the same sort of thing. However, as I say, we were missing the single authority for ancient people that they have for ancient places. So it became clear that we needed for this project to have two parts to it, at least. We needed a Pleiades part, as we called it, which is where we bring together these texts, these various authorities, into a meta authority, a virtual authority that can bring them together. And the second was the Pelagios part, where we enable the linking and the annotation that Pelagios do with place. And so this is how we started working on this. We've been working mostly so far on the so-called Pleiades part. We're not attempting to create a brand new prosopography of the entire world, as I said earlier. And because we're using linked open data, we don't need to have a single database containing all of this information. In fact, the idea of linked data is you can have multiple data sets, you can have multiple sources of data that are brought together simply by the means of RDF or other means of linking between them. So there are, as we say, many existing authorities. We seeded the SNAP project with the identifiers from three existing prosopographies: the Lexicon of Greek Personal Names, the Trismegistos people database, and the Prosopographia Imperii Romani. And we've been in the process of ingesting, in addition onto that, two other types of person database. The first are traditional prosopographies, very similar in kind to the three we started with, such as the Prosopography of the Byzantine world, the Smith Dictionary of biography and mythology, the Prosopography of Hellenistic Babylonia, the Roman inscriptions of Britain, Syriac prosopography, the prosopography of the coin collections, and the prosopography of ceramic makers and painters, which are all fairly traditional. Well, they're not necessarily traditional prosopographies, but they are lists of persons that have been brought together in a relatively traditional way and are authoritative biographical information about each individual person. And the second kind is a slightly different kind of list of authority for persons, which is more akin to a library catalogue. And in fact, many of these are, in fact, library or museum catalogues. And these include the Perseus catalogue, which is a list of all the authors of the ancient Greek and Roman world, the VIAF database, which is another authority file, which is a serialization of many dozens of national and international library catalogues with all their authors and all person-based subject headings. We have the person database from the British Museum, and we hope to, within a matter of minutes, days at least, acquire the person authority from the Xenon library catalogue. And so we've got not all of these so far, but we've got many of these in our collection. And so our aim for this is to, firstly, get the information about these people into RDF. We have each of these collections has unique URIs, has unique identifiers for each person record. They have various properties attached to them, so some of them will have information about date, some of them will have information about place, relationships with other people, titulature and professions and various other things that you can say about people. And we then want to try as much as possible to identify where there are co-references between these different data sets. So where the Lexicon of Greek Personal Names and the Trismegistos Persons Database both have a record for the same person, and it is unambiguously and fairly unproblematically a record for the same person because it cites the same inscription that this person appears in. We want to be able to merge those two into a single record, so we have one snap identifier for the 2 or 3 or multiple original identifiers that the initial databases had. So we want to be able to co-reference those people. There is a more complex issue later of how one expresses that that we believe 2 people who are mentioned in different texts and who are in some other sense they're not identical prosopographical records, but we can make a scholarly argument for them being the same person. But that's a different issue. That's something that we want to enable scholarly annotation for, because for that we need to be able to include argumentation, we need to be able to include disagreement, we need to be able to include various different ways that you can reason based on that. If one person thinks that these are the same person, that has implications across the rest of the graph. If someone else thinks they don't, we need those implications to be very, very transparent, that that this person being the brother of this person and this person being the sister of this person are only true if we believe this relationship and not if we don't. That sort of thing. So that's something we want to model much more carefully, and we're leaving to a later phase of the project. And just to quickly finish off my introductory section on the initial part of the project, the second phase we're working on is what we're calling the Pelagios part. This is where we encourage and enable linking from texts to the person authority. This is very similar to the way Pelagios has been doing so. And we also want to enable and encourage linking between data sets. As I've said, so far we have a fairly straightforward model for expressing relationships within a database. So I'm not going to go into the detail of how the RDF works here. Faith may talk about this a little bit more later. But where the LGPN has a record for such and such a person and also has a record for his daughter, and it says in each of those records father of person X, and in the daughter's record it says daughter of person Y, we can express that relationship because that relationship is already captured within the data. The same with the unproblematic co-references that I was talking about, where the LGPN and Trismegistos clearly are talking about the same person. We can just merge them and create a new person identifier for the merged record in this way. And so this is the extent to which we want to go for the initial part of the project. The scholarly annotations section is something we want to model properly later when we really have concrete examples of scholarly disagreement and scholarly argument on the subject of this stuff. So that's just by way of background to the project. I'll hand over now to Faith, who will talk a little bit more. She promises not to be too technical.
In fact, he might have been more technical than I'm going to be. I mean, I feel I should start off by saying I am not a you see, I can't even say the word. I do not have a background in prosopography. If I did, I would have named it something else that was a lot easier to pronounce. Also, as a side thing, if you're ever doing something like that and you have 2 very linked projects, have them start with a different letter, because nobody can remember which one is Pleiades and which one is Pelagios. So if I get it wrong in the later bits of the talk, I'm really blaming them. So what we're going to look at in my section is how the data is working at the back end and how we are bringing it together, and indeed why. I don't know how familiar the people are in this room with linked data. Are you looking fairly perky, or are you looking at me blankly? But the idea is that for those who don't know, and I'm not going to spend too long on this for those who do, you're making statements that this thing has a relationship with this other thing. And that's all linked data is. Thousands upon thousands of these very, very simple statements. And one of the things that is behind that allows it to work is that you have a data model that specifies here are the type of things that can have these type of relationships with these other things. Now, one of the real things in computing in general is that reuse is good. There is no plagiarism, it's wonderful. It's a community effort and sharing resources. So we didn't want to recreate the wheel. Where there already existed data models out there that we could use, then we wanted to use those. I mean, there was a question at the start, why didn't we use Foaf? Actually, the question was at the start was, why is everybody using Foaf for this? It really doesn't work for ancient people. I mean, it is very important to be able to give Plato's homepage if only the internet had been invented. So the first thing we did is actually look for other ontologies and data models which gave us some of the relationships we were looking for. Lord is the big one. That is the linked ancient world data ontology. It already defines lots of things we wanted. So to a certain extent it became the backbone of the project. And then we just had a bit of a Google to see whatever else could fit in. So we do use Foaf. It's very useful for stuff. And people are already putting it in their ontology. For a lot of the prosopographical data that's online, it's got Foaf names. So, we go with it. Prov is the provenance ontology. So one of the things that's important is saying where the data comes from, so we can keep track of it. So somebody's already spent a large amount of time working that out, let's reuse their hard work. In fact, the one thing that we couldn't really find an ontology that we wanted to cover was relationships. There are not that many modern day relationships that cover minor things like slavery and the other intricate little relationships that our ancient world people would have with each other. And so we had some fun playing with this and looking at the different ways that we could possibly interrelate to different people, from households to actual relationships to, well, we know it says that they're son, but it's not like anybody did a DNA test. So we have acknowledged children, and we have fostered children, and we have adopted children, and we have children where you don't want to go into detail. But we're not really definitively saying that there's a blood relationship there because we haven't been able to get in a TARDIS, go back in time and take a blood sample. But what came out of this was a mostly simple, or as simple as we could make it given the vagaries of relationships between humans in general, a set of relationships that we could use to link people together. And so that is our snap ontology. If you want to have a look at it, then that's the place to go. So when we brought these all together, here is an approximate model of what it looks like. Everything centres round the Lord person. Since this is prosopographical data about people, I think it is only fair that the idea of a person is the main bedrock. People can have names. This is not entirely surprising. They can have bonds with other people. They, and this is an important thing, can have a citation or a citation. So this is where this person was mentioned in the text. This is how we know this person exists because somebody wrote about them. If you didn't get written about, you didn't exist. Kind of like Twitter. So, also, again, provenance is very important. So we have agents, collections. We are not trying to take over from the existing prosopographical databases. We are trying to provide a way to point more people to them. So it is very important to us and very important to our partners who are giving us data that we make very clear that we're getting the data from them and they're the people that you should talk to. It's also very important from our perspective because if they've got something wrong or you want to disagree with something they've said, again, don't take it up with us. Here is the people you need to blame. The other thing in there is we have the bonds. So people can have relationships with other people, and right at the top there's a replaces. So a person object can replace another person. So it is actually comparatively simple. And part of this is because we don't want to take in too much information. One of the goals was take in, in fact, as little information as possible. And the relationship that I didn't mention up there is the associated place, and there's also, if you see, associated date, and there are a couple of other similar things. These are as vague as we can possibly make them. The reason that we actually created those relationships rather than using existing ones is because the existing ones wanted to say something really solid, whereas we just wanted to say this place or this date range in some way overlaps with the person, but we're not saying what it is. They could be very famous for having gone on holiday there. It could overlap with their life, hopefully. The only thing we're trying to say there is to differentiate between a 5th century Alexander and a 2nd century Alexander. We can't really use that to differ between an Alexander that was born in AD 48 and one that was born in AD 49, because that's getting a little bit outside our pay grade. That's the job of the actual projects. We just want something that can give you a rough disambiguator. So I said we didn't want to replace what was going on in the projects. What we do want to do is give a common identifier. So the idea is that the snap data sits on top as a bridging point between the many distributed datasets that exist in the different places. So what happens when somebody wants to give us their data? Well, they create their data, and each person, as they've identified them, has their URL that they've given it. That is their unique identifier. By the time they're giving the data to us, it should be both unique and fairly unchanging, because we're going to rely on it for stuff. If they're still making them up as they go along, then we'll ask them to get them back in 6 months when we actually have a solid ID we can use for the person. We then take that data and slurp the important bits into our triple store. We then run a query on it saying, hey, give me all the people, and then run a quick transformation on that, which generates our snap IDs. We then re-ingest everything into the triple store again, and then it's magically there. This is not the most efficient workflow in existence, but while we only have, 3, and then, okay, we've got a few more on, and I can do it manually in the course of a couple of hours, this is basically what works. Also, the idea is that our snap identifiers won't change. So the big 5, 6, we'll get there in a minute, datasets now have their snap identifiers set. To the best of our knowledge, the IDs we've got from them are not changing, the number of people we've got from them are not changing. We have created snap IDs for those people, and even if we re-ingest the data a bit because we've suddenly decided that we're going to use this, or we're going to add in this extra bit of information, we've told them to go away and do it, the identifiers will remain the same, which is good. So it's only when we have new stuff coming in that we now need to mint the identifiers. So this brings us on to one technical problem we had. We first started off using the Sesame triple store, which is quite a well-known one. It's the one that we use in the department the most. It is basically the standard one that we use at the department, so when we said we needed a triple store, this is what they set up for us. We got to the point of ingesting the data from our 3 main triple stores, and it just sludged to a halt. We spent ages trying to make it run faster, trying to make it run smoother, adding in more indexing, adding in more memory, pushing it, adding a bit of lubrication to the sysadmin and then to the database, whatever. But no, it was just swift like mud. And we went back to the specs which said it could cope with this many million triples, and noticed the fine print which said some of the results came back within 5 minutes. Now, possibly you have more free time than I do, but you're academics, so I doubt it. But I don't have 5 minutes to wait for a web page. So we decided to give it another go, and we tried using Forstore, mostly because my background was at Southampton and Forstore came out of Southampton, therefore I know people who know how to use it and can send them annoyed emails if I need help. But we got it up there and it worked. And the information comes back quickly and we've added more data and it hasn't fallen over yet. So currently, touch wood, it's all working for us. And at this point we have 673,982 persons in the triple store, plus their associated data. They come from, as Gabby said, PIR, LGPN, Trismegistos, the British Museum and VIAF, which get us to 673,754, and we have the first bunch of merged records, which are merged people which have gone in and are doing the next bunch. I'll give you the IDs and show you how you can look them up. Within that 673,982, there are currently 6 numbers that won't work. So if you're having a go at it before I fix them and you get one of those 6 numbers, congratulations, you won a cookie, but that's just try a different number. Obviously when you get out of that range you will get a nice little message saying the person can't be found. But they're all towards the top end of that range, not surprisingly, they're all in the merged people. So we're talking about merged people, but what are we actually talking about? So this is a very simple little diagram which pretty much explains what is going on with them. Once we've got the information in from the projects, we create a snap identifier, and when we want to link them together, we create another snap identifier that links them. We had a lot of very long discussions when we first started doing this, in that if we had a third snap identifier and we wanted to link that in, does that mean we need suddenly an exponential number with all the different possible merges between them? Because people might agree, people might disagree. And having drawn many, many diagrams on whiteboards, which generally looked like an explosion of mushroom lollipops, we decided that this was an insane idea and they'd all just go in the one merged person. This makes things a lot simpler, because when you're writing the queries, which as the Muggins who is normally writing the queries, I like simpler, it means you only ever get 3 layers of linkage. We have the IDs that replace IDs, and we have the IDs that are derived from the external IDs. And currently it never gets more complicated than that. This does make things an awful lot simpler. So I've said that this stuff exists now, and in fact you can go and look it up if you're online. The URL to find a person profile page is this, data.statdragon.net/person and then the ID number. And here are the wonderful list of IDs. We also had a lot of discussion about where we should start numbering. Well, 1 seems like the obvious place. We did think for a while maybe we should start at 1,000,001, so they were all about the same length, because it'll take us a while to break 1,000,000, although, you know, I'm hopeful we'll get there maybe in the next year or so, which will be really cool. But having done that and kept it that way for 6 months, we just decided that was a bit silly, because anybody coming to the site wouldn't think, oh yes, I need to start at 1,000,000. They would just put in 64 and then be very surprised when nothing appeared. This was user testing, and by user I mean us. So that is the one slightly more human readable version. We also want to share this with other people. So we have computer readable versions. Well, okay, the top one is a bit more human readable. If you want to skip our currently slightly less pretty web pages, you can communicate directly with the triple store. So we have both the public endpoint. I'll put up a snorkel one soonish, but this is the default one. So you can go in, you can type in your queries, you can get results back. You can play with our data. If you want to go in through the computer one, then you can query the data set computationally, you can do stuff with the data. That's how a lot of our web pages and things are currently being done. And when we were getting the merged information in from our partners, what happens is they give us the list of here is the original URIs from the project. So we now have a nice script that one of our interns, David, was working on, which has to go and do the query and look up the snap ID to work out what we should actually be merging together. So I know that one works because we made him use it. So we can get human readable data out and we can get computer readable data out. What is happening now? Well, the big thing, and this will be happening over the next couple of months, is if the website needs polishing up. It's currently, we're getting information out, but it's not in its prettiest, most human readable form. And also we've got information about the projects and information about the collections that are on there. We actually want web pages to show this is Trismegistos, this is the BM, and link back to them. So you can actually look this information up. As I said, the partner projects and collaborators are very important to us, so we want to make sure that they're actually really represented. We also want to have search pages. It's all very well going to a URL and adding in a random number, but if I actually want to go and find Alexander, or if I know what the reference is in Trismegistos and I want to go and find out what snap ID it is, then you're a bit stuck unless you can use Sparkle. So once we get the person pages looking good, the second thing will be a nice simple interface so you can go in and say, search by name, search by the original identifier, search by place. All the little things that it will just be the normal queries people will want to do, and we want to save you some time. We'll also be adding in more merged people. We have a bunch more lists of here are linkages we know exist, and these will hopefully be added in soon as well, and we'll also have their URIs frozen. So again, there won't be the 6 magic ones that don't work. Instead, it will be a full set and they will not change. And hopefully, in the next couple of months, this should all happen one way or another. In our copious free time, and we've got interns coming in and we've got more data sets coming in as well. So this will be slowly expanding. If anybody in the room has some data sets that they want to contribute, then we're more than happy to talk to you, because the more people, the merrier. We want to break that 1 million barrier. And also, we're looking ahead to the next stage. Now, Gabby already mentioned that one of the big things with Snap 2 is going to be how we deal with scholarly disagreements. And when we were going through the merging records, we actually had a couple pop up. Now, mostly going through them was easy, because Sebastian was going through the LGPN records and some of them said, this is the same as PIR, this number. And then we made a list of all the ones that said, this is the same as, and that was easy. But we got some of the occasions where LGPN had decided that a set of references replied to one person, and PIR thought that that set of references applied to 2 people. Now, people in the project were taking bets on which one they thought was true, but it's important to us not to take sides, even if one of the sides was in the meeting and said he was right. So as a result, these ones got shelved to the next stage, because we want to be able to make clear that LGPN is making this claim and PIR is making this claim. And one of the important things is that when they go in, when a person replaces the others, the people being replaced are not lost. So even if we go with this and say, okay, we think LGPN is right, and that all these three people should be merged together into one glorious merge of all of them, and you want to come along and say, actually, no, I think PIR was right, and these are two separate people, you will still be able to link to the two PIR persons as separate. They'll just have a little note on the page saying, make sure you're doing this on purpose because we generally think this information has been superseded. So if you're linking to it because you haven't updated your URL, check you're linking to what you think you're linking to. If not, go for it. You agree with PIR, good for you. So part of it, and this is why we started ending up with the exploding mushroom lollipops of people, is to make it clear that not only can you link to the merged ones, but the data is not lost. In fact, one of the things that will be quite nice is over time we'll keep track of how the mergers happen, we'll keep track of the scholarly arguments about whether things fit together or not, and we'll be able to see how this changes as new knowledge becomes available, as new data sets become part of the system. And who knows, maybe at some point we'll have somebody actually doing some studies on the scholarly discourse around prosopographical linking, using the data not of who the people there are, but of how we chose to link them. So I'll just finish off by showing you I apologise for the unprettiness, just some examples of what we have on the website. Now, one of the interesting things is that the different data sets all gave us very slightly different data. So this person is from PIR, and we don't have any associated people, but we do have a textual reference, and this is one of the things. The next stage, it won't be a URI anymore, it will actually give the text. We just haven't done that bit of the link up yet. We have a date. In fact, I think on the PIR ones, possibly all the dates are exactly the same because this is just the range that PIR covers. So as I said, they are only really, really vaguely related to the people. They're just for disambiguation in the most general sense. And we have a name. And again, we actually have a link to the name resource, and this will be replaced as well. With the actual names. This is important because the name resource frequently has name variants as well, rather than just a given name. So we can also see the ID. We have a link, and if I click on that, it in fact won't take you anywhere for reasons, but if that was linked up to the website, which it is in the case of the other ones, then it will take you to that project website and that person page to give you additional information. We also link to the publisher. So then we have Trismegistos, which is pretty similar in this example in what's available. But moving on to LGPN, we're starting to get in relationships and people. And again, this will be expanded, so it will actually say what the relationship is and who it's to, and that will be linkable, so you can click on it and you can go to the related person page. And we're also beginning to link in with places. The British Museum, some of these are slightly more flaky than others. I think the British Museum ones were chosen because for the date range, but an occasional person has stuck in who, I don't know, was writing about that date range or something. But this one is actually an ancient person. And you can see here we've got lots of names they're linked to. Again, will look prettier, we'll actually show the text. And Viaf, the same. And we have here a merged person. So this is actually a link up between LGPN and PIR. One thing that isn't currently being, and you see it's starting to bring together all the different textual references. There's a whole bunch of associated people on this one. It combines the two date ranges so you can see them. it puts the places, and we have the variations in the name. This one actually confused us for a little while until it got pointed out that one of them was in beta code, which is why they look so different. But they do in fact say the same thing, honestly they do. And you can see here are the snap IDs that are being replaced, and here is the original links. And again, these all work as links. One thing that's currently not displaying here but will be added in as part of the making it prettier phase is that each of these merges has a justification comment that justifies the merge. So these ones all say LGBN says that it's the same as PIR whatever, and we're taking them at their word, making it sound slightly more scholarly. And so each of these pages where you've got this, you will see the justification and who is making it and who has published the merge. We had a number of very interesting discussions with the Trismegistos ones, which aren't in there yet, because one person did an automated procedure to pull out where they thought all the links were, and then somebody else checked it. So we're having great fun deciding who got credit on creating the merge records in terms of who got the blame if there was something wrong with them. We still haven't come quite to an agreement about how much of an automated process means that you don't need to get credit on that one, but mostly everybody who's putting in is getting credit at the moment. So you will see that information and you can trace back to find out how these merged people came to be. So that is the end of the presentation section of the evening. We would both like to thank you all for listening, and if you have any questions, we would be more than happy to answer them.